Good day, and welcome to Narendra Swiss Weekly Wraps. I am Viv Govender. This week we'll cover Trump as usual, but look at the US Fed, as well as developing tensions between India and Pakistan and how it might affect you. In our tech segment, we're going to look at a revision of the chips restrictions that the US has put out globally, as well as possible impacts that Google might be feeling in its search business. So let's start off with the latest from Trump. Trump basically had done a deal with Keir Starmer from the UK. It includes things like the UK purchasing Boeing planes. We still end up with the base tariff rate of about 10%, with some exceptions put in place there. And I think that's something to be, that's an important factor to look at. It seems that Trump is willing to get down to about a 10% base rate with everybody, that he thinks he's doing a fair deal with the US, but not to back to zero. I do think that that's obviously not the kind of fearful situation we see right now, where we're seeing 30% tariffs on some places, etc. In some cases even higher, like in the case of China. But it's definitely not a case where we ideally want to be at. A 10% tariff is still a tariff. It's still a situation in which we are looking at global trade being restricted. And if the US puts the 10% tariff up, we're going to see similar tariff restrictions being put up globally as well. And I think that is, long-term negative, though it's not the worst case scenario. We also had the US Fed talk this week. No change. I think that with regards to the Fed, they are looking at a world right now in which we are seeing a great deal of uncertainty around both inflation as well as growth rates. So it makes sense from that point of view that they are looking at, kind of holding pat on making a decision at the moment. It's possible that inflation may spike up because of tariffs. With that scenario, we'll be cutting rates into this scenario. At the same time, there still has the threat of recession coming through. And in that scenario, obviously you want to have a bit of powder dry to cut rates, to basically give the economy a bit of a boost. So it makes sense to basically hold off at the moment. That being said, I think that this is a scenario that's going to continue, pretty much for the next foreseeable future. The reason being is that, again, this is my point of view. It may not be something analytical. I suspect Trump likes to be the center of attention. Remember the deal that he had between the US and Mexico and Canada, that he basically kind of scrapped and rewrote. That deal was basically created in his administration. Prior to that, his administration, there's a thing called NAFTA, and he basically kind of scrapped NAFTA and created something called the USMCA, which is the United States, Mexico, Canada. It was the agreement here, and that was the agreement that he basically came in the second term and scrapped. So he kind of scrapped his own agreement. You can't argue here, he can't argue that that agreement was so horrible because it's put in by some other person. It's his own agreement that he scrapped. I suspect that one of the reasons he did scrap it was not just because he wanted to get a better deal for the US. He kind of likes the chaos and the attention that he gets from the stuff when the world is paying attention to everything he's saying. That Liberty Day meeting caused the market to absolutely go into chaos because of what he said. Right now, every time he has a meeting with one of these people like Keir Starmer or Carney from Canada, he's getting a lot of attention, a lot of focus on himself. And given the kind of narcissistic personality that I suspect he is, it is basically something which I think kind of strokes his ego. At the same time, we can't put into play the idea that Trump is a totally irrational actor. If you look at what Trump is doing, there is a plan that you could put in place that could explain what he's doing. That plan would be as follows. If the US is able to raise a few $100 billion from tariffs, it would basically allow the US to go out and cut income tax for the bottom half of income taxpayers, almost zero. We're talking, if the full tariffs are going in place, you would cut taxes on people making $150,000 and below to zero. $150,000 is more than double the average or the median income in the US. if he gets tariffs down to 10% or even lower than that in some cases, that's still probably going to raise a bit of money. And if you're applying that money to people making less income and therefore paying less taxes, there's quite a large chunk of the income tax base that could basically be excluded from paying income tax. The people that vote, basically, or people that vote, it doesn't matter whether or not they are paying $150,000 a year in taxes or have $150,000 income, or they have $20,000 income. They still have one vote. And if you go out and you basically get like the bottom half of the population zero income tax, the amount of people that are going to vote for you is going to go up substantially. So from a political point of view, that's a very politically popular thing to do if you can do that. The next thing is that what it's doing to the currency. Remember, we see the rand weakening as it has. It's not just about the rand versus the dollar, or the rand, strengthening as it has versus the dollar. We can't just look at the rand versus the dollar. We have to look at the rand versus other currencies as well. Against the pound and the euro, we aren't seeing the kind of weakening that we are seeing versus the rand as we're seeing with the dollar. It's a case of dollar's weakness as opposed to rand's strength that we're seeing at the moment. And again, this may be part of his plan. If you are able to get the dollar weaker, it does a couple things for you that's beneficial. Firstly, it promotes exports and cuts down on imports, which kind of works against his whole tariff thing, but that's another story. But it also cuts some of your debt in real terms that you owe to the rest of the world. Remember, the US has trillions of dollars of international debt that it owes. And if you're able to weaken the dollar by about 20-30%, that's 20-30% less that you owe for that international debt. Another big positive. So from that point of view, you could make an argument that some of the things he's done around tariffs, around weakening the currency, etc., are part of a longer-term plan. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's something that you could look at from that point of view. Now, moving on to this India and Pakistan. Before that, but from the point of view of people like Jerome Powell, etc., this uncertainty, even though it may be part of a larger plan, is not what you want as a reserve bank that's trying to basically, which has a mandate to protect the value of a currency, which has a mandate to do things like protect growth in the short term, etc. So I do think that unemployment, at least in the short to medium term, etc. I think that from his point of view, from Powell's point of view, what Trump is doing is obviously chaotic. Though, from Trump's point of view, they may be part of a larger plan. Now, not to say that I think this plan is going to work, quite frankly, because when you mess around with tariffs, when you mess around with the value of your currency, there's things that can happen that are going to change around you dynamically. You lower the value of the dollar in a way that the world doesn't like. The dollar's placed in the world as the reserve currency. Maybe that goes away. And the cost that has to the US economy is vastly larger than any kind of savings you can make from having a weaker currency. You go out and you mess around with tariffs, and you have reciprocal tariffs being placed on you, then the drop in global trade may affect you in your own country as well. And the effect on that might be worse than the benefit you might get from the tariffs you raise. Those are the kind of confounding effects that we're seeing out there. At the same time, the US is not the sole superpower in the world anymore. The Chinese have risen quite strongly. And if the Chinese take advantage of this particular bit of US chaos and go out and make deals with the rest of the world, the US could easily find itself not just no longer at the center of the world, but cut out of the center of the world. It could be basically Europe and China as being the main trade relationship with the world, and the US basically sitting on the outskirts. The US could be basically no longer the main trading partner of many countries in the developing world, because now they're looking at China as the more reliable partner in this case. So the knock-on effects, the second-order effects, third-order effects could be quite large. Now, moving on, like I said, to India and Pakistan. For those that don't know what's happened there was a terrorist attack in India where Muslims attackers targeted Hindu tourists. That at least it seems to be on the surface what occurred. When you have that kind of religious kind of division occurring, what you do find is that India is tending to blame Pakistan for that attack. It's happened in the past where there was an attack on an army facility or an army convoy a few years ago. There was also an attack previous to that in Mumbai, which killed hundreds of people. Again, the one person taken alive from the attackers was found to be a Pakistani citizen. So India, basically, when they have these attacks occurring, which have this religious aspect, they tend to blame Pakistan for them. And so therefore India launched some attacks against Pakistan. Maybe they didn't. We don't know for certain. They lost a couple of aircraft in that attack. But this is the kind of response India has done in the past. There was in the previous attack on the military convoy. There was a sortie into Pakistan that basically blew up what India says was a terrorist base, which Pakistan said was just a bunch of wood. An Indian plane was shot down, and the Indian pilot was taken captive and eventually released as part of a peace deal between India and Pakistan. And so from that point of view, that part seems to be quite normal. The part that's not normal, the part that's different this time around, is India has used this particular event to go after a treaty that they've had with Pakistan around river flow or water flow that's lasted decades, that's lasted through wars, actual wars, not just like terrorist attacks. There were actual wars between India and Pakistan in the last several decades, and this treaty has basically lasted through those wars. There's not been an amendment. There's not been a suspension of the treaty. Now there is. It's not a coincidence that this suspension comes after we saw India try and amend this treaty a few years ago and got rebuffed by an independent arbitrator. So I suspect that what's happening around the water treaty is something that kind of plays into India's hands, because they are able to use this bit of uncertainty as an opportunity in order to basically renegotiate or change unilaterally a treaty it doesn't think favors it or it works in its interests anymore. So what does this treaty work on? There are about 3 rivers that basically go from India into Pakistan. The treaty says these rivers are not to be used by India in any consumptive way, meaning that they can use the water to go and do a hydropower dam. That's fine, but they can't take the water and water their crops with it, because the water will be used up. When you hydropower it, water goes to the system, but there's still water at the end, and the water then flows into Pakistan. That's fine. But if the water goes into the farmland, etc., that water is lost. Now, India wants to change some of this stuff. The problem for Pakistan is that this is water that Pakistan really, really needs. It's foundation of not just Pakistan's hydropower, but Pakistan's agricultural sector as well. Without this water coming through in a consistent way, even if they were only to basically change how the flows, same amount of water flowed into Pakistan, but not at the same regular pace that it currently does, it would really negatively affect Pakistan's economy, maybe in a way that's almost existential. And I suspect that this is an area that Pakistan is more willing to fight over than, possibly a sortie that may or may not have attacked the woods or a terrorist base or whatever it may be in the past. At the same time, India, I think, because they've attacked this treaty in the past in the courts, probably has a plan for this water. India is a large population. It is water scarce because they've used a lot of groundwater areas and so on, and they could really use this water that they're sending into Pakistan. May use this opportunity to try and basically alleviate some of its longer-term water needs. So this, I think, is the real big danger of this thing. It's not so much the military tit for tat that we are seeing right now. I think it really is this water issue that could be a big problem going forward, and we need to watch out for that. And if that does basically, become a big issue, India also has some vulnerabilities. There's water that flows from China into India that's used for agriculture. China is a huge supporter of Pakistan. If the Indians delay water to Pakistan, do the Chinese delay water into India? That's a question to be discussed. And China, by the way, has a lot more desert regions than India does, and they could possibly use that water for other things as well. So there's a whole escalation that might come in the water situation, where it goes from India, Pakistan to maybe India, China, and that might be something that also plays out good in the future. And remember, not only did India have disputes with Pakistan in the past, including wars, they've also had disputes, including wars with China, and they continue to have these disputes going forward. So that's an area I think that might be of real concern in the global economy. And then finally, let's look at what's happening with Google. Google's basically situation with regards to AI is very, very double-edged. Number one, they are the leaders in AI. Gemini, near the top, but there's things beyond Gemini, like AlphaFold. It was a number of other different things that they've made, things like GNOME, etc., that are undisputed leaders in areas like protein folding or material science and so on. At the same time, the biggest part of Google's business is the search business. And the one thing that has happened over the last little while is that people have started to go away from search and go more towards AI. We've seen, for instance, with regards to Safari, the amount of search done Safari has actually dropped for the first time ever. But Safari is, by the way, Apple's Apple's browser on the Apple iOS platform. And remember, Google values this enough that they pay tens of billions of dollars a year to Apple to be the #1 search engine on the iOS system. The fact that we see that falling indicates that we are likely to be seeing AI eating into basically Google's search business. Now, Google has other businesses. I mean, YouTube is a business of its own that's magnificent. Waymo, the car driving taxi service, robot taxi service, is growing at an unbelievable rate. If it was a business of its own, Waymo would be worth a couple $100 billion at least. To give you an idea, Waymo is doing about $1.3 billion of 1.3 million rides per month. 1.3 million rides per month, and they're only operating in about 4 or 5 cities. This is a rollout that, if it happens, massively in the US and other parts of the world, is going to result in, hundreds of millions of rides per month, probably for Google and Waymo. That's a gigantic business. That's a business that's valuable, if not more valuable than Uber. Think of it that way. YouTube is more valuable by many measures than Netflix is. And that's not even counting other parts of it, like I said, DeepMind, which is at least as valuable probably as OpenAI. So there's other parts of Google that are very valuable, but the cash cow, the part that earns the money right now, is the search business. And Google is left with this real big dilemma. Does it focus on a legacy business that's still earning a lot of money and try and protect it, or does it go and look at these other businesses that are probably going to be huge, maybe multi-trillion-dollar businesses in the future? And my question is, or the question that people are asking is, what is it going to do, and how do you value the company? Do you value it based on lost revenue in the search business, or do you value it in growth in things like YouTube and AI, etc.? And there's been an example of a company that has done this, or has faced this particular kind of dilemma in the past. That's Microsoft. When we had the emergence of the social networks, and we had the emergence of mobile, Microsoft basically chose to protect its legacy, Office and Windows business, as opposed to try and really attack, its like mobile. That gave up like Android to Google, because Microsoft wasn't going to go out and basically give away a free operating system when its business was operating systems. You don't get free Windows; you pay for Windows. So why would you not pay for the operating system you had for your phone? Okay, and that kind of lost them the race when it came to mobile. Maybe Google has learned from this, and maybe they're going to focus more on AI. Maybe they're going to focus more on the new technology. But it's very difficult for any business to walk away from, a business as lucrative as search is for Google at the moment. And I think that's going to be the big question for Alphabet/Google going forward. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to speaking to you guys next week. Cheers.